Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
From Su Must Rise to the Sky, to the time the Griffin Knight was beheaded, it was only a breath or two, in such a short time. The three heroic warriors and a heroic knight were still defending against the corps of skeletons and stopped Anginus by the way. The heroic archer was still slaying warrior skeletons. The two mages were still releasing spells one by one, sending large pieces of skeleton bombing. It was the players on the city wall who first noticed the upheaval. These players who kept the camera open from beginning to end, who wanted to record the war, discovered the fall of the Griffin Knight earlier than those hero professionals, who should have coordinated the entire battlefield. F***K. What did I see? I'm hallucinating. With a face full of disbelief, a player rubbed his eyes desperately, but when he looked again, he still saw the figure of the King of Bones standing in place, the huge corpse of the griffin falling to the ground, and the blood mist that had not yet dissipated in the air. Epic. April the 13th, the hero was beheaded. Not just one player can't believe it. Almost all the players who followed Sumu and the Griffin Knight's battle had a hard time accepting this result. One is the King of Bones in the Lord rank, one is the Lion Knight of the Epic rank. A moment ago, the Griffin Knight was still soaring high in the sky, throwing short spears with an invincible attitude, bombarding the King of Bones on the ground, and the King of Bones can do only embarrassed dodge, escape. The next moment, the King of Skeletons moved twice in a row, and the epic hero, who had high hopes in the entire giant rock city, was killed like this. Almost instant kill, no resistance, even the corpse was torn to shreds. The huge anti-difference brought about by the instant reversal of the battle is said to be unacceptable to players who are new to this world, and even more difficult to accept the guards on the city walls. You killed the Griffin Knight. You have gained 250,000 experience points. The system beep sounded. Sumu ignored it and walked straight ahead. When the Griffin was slashed by Sumu, he was basically helpless, and after falling to the ground, he fell into a piece of flesh. It's just that the Griffin Knight in the elite rank can't bring him many attribute points, so he simply ignores it. It's the Griffin Knight, although the body was directly torn apart by death cuts, and even the armor and lance on his body were also shattered. This epic hero has one piece of equipment that cannot be shattered, that spear. With the death of the Griffin Knight, the spear bag fell to the ground and became Suma's trophy. Take a few steps forward and pick up the spear bag. After removing all the marks on the spear sack with the erosion talent, this epic quality piece of equipment also became Suma's property. Its properties also came to mind in Suma's mind. Name: Wings of Liberty. Quality: epic. Category: equipment. Function: automatically absorb the free elements between heaven and earth, and condense 10 short burst spears every day. The holder can also actively inject magic power into it to speed up the condensation speed of the explosive short spear. 1000 mana points. Root. Equipment description: burn or explode. You can have both. Nice gear. Although its power is fixed, it is only equivalent to the ordinary skills released by the casters of the epic rank. But the appearance of this spear bag undoubtedly made up for Suma's lack of long-range attack power, at least before stepping into the epic stage. This spear bag is enough. Reversing his spear, Sumu smiled slightly and straddled it behind his back. Then, a short burst spear appeared in his hand, and Sumu looked towards the city wall. During the short delay, the 7 hero professionals have already reacted. 3 hero warriors, 1 killed by Agnes. This accident happened before the remaining 2 heroic warriors and a heroic knight could avenge their dead comrades in arms. They didn't care to stop Agnes and the skeleton army, and returned to the city wall at the first time. The remaining 3 hero professionals, a spellcaster, who specializes in wind spells, is still guiding a high-level spell, and cannot move temporarily. After Miss Skeletons were frozen, he had the intention of retreating. As for the hero archer, as the first aboriginal to discover the anomaly, his figure has long since disappeared from the city wall. There are 6 left. Looking at the 6 hero professionals on the city wall with interest, Sumu flipped the short spear in his hand. His sturdy body changed slightly, and his right hand holding the short spear also raised. Wow! Motivated by Suma's terrifying power, that is several times stronger than that of the Griffin Knight, the short spear, full of explosive elements, turned into a flash of lightning almost as soon as it was released, with a terrifying air wave and roar that broke the air, heading towards the enemy. Fly over the city wall. See this scene. The pupil of the wind mage, who was guiding the high-level spells, shrank tightly and couldn't help screaming, "Roger, help me!" because this short spear is aimed at him. Hero warriors and hero knights are too far apart to help. At this time, only another mage who has reached the pinnacle of heroic rank and converted to ice spells can help him. With just a little interception by a frost barrier, he can stop the guiding spell and escape smoothly. However, instead of helping him, the mage evaded while Suma's attention was on the wind mage. After a slight fluctuation of magic power, the man who was supposed to be the most powerful among the remaining 6 hero pros, the powerful one, also disappeared into the city wall. Rogris, Suma's heart moved zero, thinking of the information he got from the incarnation of Rogris, and the information he got from the Blackwood City Lord. How could he not know that the ice element mage, who just disappeared, was exactly the Lwa he was looking for? Gris' real body. No wonder, when he first appeared here, Sumu felt that the mage was a little familiar. It was not that Sumu had seen Rogris' real body, but that he had eroded Rogris' incarnation, and read through the incarnation's memory. Sumu felt familiar with Rogris' real body, only, he didn't think about it. In other words, he did not expect that the person he had been looking for would appear on the battlefield as a guardian, and join the siege against him. Phase shift. Countless messages flashed through his mind instantly, and Sumu didn't hesitate at all. After realizing that the fleeing ice magician was Rogris, he immediately released phase shift, and appeared in front of the wind magician. Boom. The explosive short spear exploded in the hand. Suma's gauntlet and half of his arm were blasted with cracks, full of scorch marks, but he ignored it at all, but punched the wind mage in the chest with a heavy punch. The guidance of high-level spells was forcibly interrupted, and the wind magician was instantly devoured. Coupled with the damage caused by Suma's punch, the heroic mage who was originally aloof fell to the ground with a roll of his eyes. After getting the wind mage, Sumu looked at the other 3 hero professionals. There is already a 5.5 lover in hand, and there is no need to keep the remaining 3. Phase shift. Appearing among the 3 hero professionals, who have not yet reacted, the skeleton sword in Suma's hand slashed in a circle. The last 3 hero professionals were directly cut off and fell to the ground. Of the 7 hero professionals, 1 was killed by Agnes, 3 were killed by Sumu, 1 was starred by Sumu, and 2 escaped. So far, there is no force in the entire giant rock city that can fight against them. That's right, there are nearly 20,000 professionals on the city wall. There are nearly 10,000 players in the city, but when Sumu and Agnes both attacked these professionals who could have fought against tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of troops, the only end was to be beheaded. Without the threat, Sumu waved his hand, and tens of thousands of corpses poured into the city, beginning the 4th massacre. And Sumu, once again, he came to the wind-type mage, who lost his resistance. The ossuary came out, covered on the forehead of the wind mage. When the unknown energy gradually eroded the heroic mage's body, and gathered towards his brain, Sumu also read his memory as he wished. After a long time, a dark mage broke through the body of the wind mage, and climbed out and joined the siege of the giant rock city. Sumu also got the information he wanted. Rogris, full name Rogris Salmon, is an ice mage at the pinnacle of heroic rank. Of course, this is just the message that Rogris has revealed. The information obtained from the memory of the wind mage shows that Rogris is extremely mysterious. A few years ago, this ice magician, who had already reached the pinnacle of the heroic rank, appeared in the Duchy of Ruhr, and accepted the invitation of the Grand Duke of Ruhr to become the guardian of the Ruhr King City. In order to win over this mysterious and powerful mage, the Grand Duke of Ruhr did not hesitate to build a mage tower for him in the Ruhr King City. And Rogris did not disappoint the Archduke Ruhr. No matter what difficulties encountered, as long as the upper limit of the hero's rank is not exceeded, Rogris can easily solve it. The other 2 guardians, including the wind element mage, agreed that it might not be long before Rogris could break through the limit of the heroic rank and enter the epic rank. Corresponding to power is mystery. Even in front of familiar people such as the Grand Duke of Ruhr, Rogris wore a hooded robe all the year round, hiding 01's body and face in the hood of the robe usually. As long as the Grand Duke of Ruhr did not summon, Rogris stayed in his mage tower almost all the year round, and his mage tower is a forbidden place in the Forbidden Land. Except for Rogris himself, even the apprentices and alchemy assistants he accepted could not step into the mage tower. Mysterious and powerful. This is what the wind mage knows about Rogris. It is precisely because he has a certain understanding of Rogris that when he is in danger, the wind mage instinctively asks Rogris for help, which leads Sumu to recognize his true face. Rogris Salmon. After sorting out all the information, Sumu fell into deep thought. It is clear, the escaped ice mage was the body of Rogris he was looking for. There are many ways to disappear in plain sight, such as assassin's stealth, such as space mage's teleportation, such as Suma's phase shift, and so on. Considering that Rogris specializes in ice spells, his avatar also practices curse spells. What he used when he left the city wall was probably the teleportation scroll, a very valuable scroll with a teleportation circle inscribed by a space mage, as long as a space coordinate is recorded in it. After tearing it apart, the teleportation array can be triggered, and the user will be teleported to a fixed coordinate point. In this way, after Rogris left, the place where he appeared is likely to be his mage tower, in the Ruhr King city. After thinking silently in his heart, Suma's eyes twinkled. The battle for Big Rock is over. When most of the professionals were beheaded, even if there were still hundreds of thousands of residents in this city, it was just the experience harvested by the core of skeletons. For this, Sumu command is not required. The core of bones can do it on its own, just like when he was in the bone burial ground. The core of bones swept the entire bone burial ground according to his orders. To prevent accidents from happening, Sumu can also choose to keep Agnes behind as for himself. Sumu is going to take a look at the Mage Tower in Rogris. The giant rock city is less than 200 kilometers away from the Ruhr King city. At Suma's current speed, even if there is no phase shift, it will only take less than an hour to reach it. As for the danger, unless he encounters the top epic hero, or a legendary hero, with Suma's current strength, he can easily escape even if he loses, and inviting a Griffin Knight has already caused the Grand Duke of Ruhr to bleed, and it is too distressing. How could he invite another epic hero to be stationed in the Ruhr King city? There are no more than a dozen hero ranks in the entire Ruhr Principality, and there are only 8 who are damaged in Suma's hands. Even if the remaining hero professionals gather in the Ruhr King city, it is difficult to threaten Sumu. So, his royal city. It seems that there is no danger. It's just that Rogris didn't return to the Mage Tower. If he really returns to that Mage Tower, Suma's lost legacy through the teleportation scroll, he is bound to win. Thinking of this, Sumu directly handed over the skeleton army of Giant Rock City to Commander Agnes, while he left the Giant Rock City and ran towards the direction of the Ruhr King city, quickly disappearing into the wilderness. Time goes back to the moment when Rogris escaped. Sumu recognized Rogris, and Rogris naturally recognized Sumu. Only, what he never expected was that, in just over a month, his plan to go to the burial ground to retrieve the soul crystal and the altar of death had not yet been implemented, and that strange undead left that world of death first, and the strength has been increased countless times. Roglis is jealous. In his expectation, the strange undead must have benefited greatly from the altar of death, and it has grown from a warrior rank undead to a skeleton king, who can kill even epic heroes. Pity, he was one step too late. If he can implement his plan in advance, retrieve the soul crystal, and find the altar of death, maybe at this time he has already transformed himself into an epic big lich. According to the extent of the sudden increase in the strength of the King of Bones, even if he ascends to the sky in one step, it is not impossible to directly transfer to the legendary Lich King. Pity, a plan is just a plan after all. The reality is that the strange undead has become the current King of Bones, and he has lost his incarnation, lost his soul crystal, and lost his chance to ascend to the sky. At the same time of jealousy, Rogris was also terrified. He didn't know if the King of Bones could recognize him, so when he had to appear on the battlefield, Rogris kept a low profile and lowered his sense of existence. As long as the Griffin Knight can kill him, he still has a chance to regain the soul crystal and the death altar and continue his plan. Only with the Griffin Knight being counter-killed, Rogris' final plan also failed. When the Wind Mage called out his name, he resolutely tore up the last teleportation scroll and teleported himself from the wall of the giant rock city back to the Mage Tower. Returning to the Mage Tower, Rogris was still uneasy in his heart. The death altar is no chance to get. He knew very well how attractive the altar of death was to an undead. Since the King of Bones has left the burial place, it means that he has a way to take the altar of death. Next, what should be done? Rogers was a little anxious. The giant rock city was destined to be destroyed. Even epic heroes like the Griffin Knight were beheaded. The few remaining hero professionals were naturally unable to resist the King of Bones. When the news of the destruction of Giant Rock City reached the Ruhr King city, it was when he was in a dilemma. Appearing, it means that he is a deserter from the first battle of Giant Rock City. If he does not show up, the Grand Duke of Ruhr may think that he has died in battle. In order to prevent the King of Bones from rushing into the Ruhr King city, the Ruhr Grand Duke will continue to ask for help from the human kingdom, and even the human empire. At that time, more epic heroes and even legendary heroes will appear in the Ruhr King city. Rodriguez is worried. When he was still the most powerful keeper of the Duchy of Ruhr, he owned a separate mage tower, and what he did would not be questioned. When he could no longer show his worth, what he did in the past, everything will become his Achilles heel. If someone with a will to investigate, it is not difficult to find that he is secretly practicing necromancy. If you enter this mage tower, you will find his biggest secret. No matter what happens, the secret of his secret practice of necromancy will be exposed. At that time, he will be unacceptable to the nations of mankind. Since the preparations have been made to not merge with the living, not as good. Thinking of this, Rogris' eyes flashed fiercely. Over the years, in order to prevent his secrets from being discovered, he has already secretly made a lot of preparations. There is more than one way to become an archlich. Transferring with the help of soul crystals and death altars is just the safest and most secretive plan. Another option, as long as he uses it, let alone the success rate, he will definitely become the great enemy of all human nations. But he dreamed of changing his job as a big lich. From a human being degenerated into an immortal undead, he stood on the opposite side of all the living, and would have become the enemy of the living. Regardless of the process, the results don't seem to be different. At best, the former is unattractive, and the latter is more likely to arouse the pursuit of human heroes. I have a decision in my mind. Rogris stepped out a few steps, and rushed to the top of the mage tower. He carefully took out a sealed box from the concealment and opened it. A notebook shrouded in the slightest black mist appeared in front of him. This notebook is a lost legacy. His method of incarnation, his curse spells, and his method of transforming into archlich, all come from this notebook. Take a deep breath. Roglis placed the note in the center of the top of the tower. A magic circle that has not been activated has already been portrayed in that place. Notes are embedded. Nearly endless black mist diffused out of the notebook and poured into the magic circle that had been activated by Rogris. Then, along the lines of extremely concealed magic, the traces of mist gradually spread in the Roar King city. Blood sacrifice. Using notes as a medium, blood sacrifice a city. This is the second method of Rogris transfer to archlich. Hurry up and hurry up. In less than an hour, Sumu crossed the distance between the giant rock city and the Roar King city, and appeared near the largest city in the Roar Principality. But, surprisingly, Sumu, until he was about to approach the city, he still hadn't received the system's notification that he had entered the warning range of the Roar King city. To the opposite, he faintly felt a strong aura of death coming from the front. You must know that, as the largest city in the Roar Principality, the warning range of the Roar King city is a full 20 kilometers. Such a city with millions of people should be full of vigor and vitality. In the induction of the undead like Sumu, it is angry. And now, he didn't feel the slightest bit of anger. Instead, he sensed the strong aura of death at a distance of 20 kilometers. With a dignified expression on his face, Sumu moved on. The closer it is to the Roar King city, the more obvious and richer the breath of death is. When he arrived near the city, Sumu could clearly feel that this city, which was full of vitality, seemed to have become a city of death. The concentration of the breath of death emanating from it is no less than that of the Death Castle with the Death Altar. Interesting. Standing outside the city wall, he looked towards the city wall. At this time, he still didn't receive the system's beep. The many guards who were supposed to be stationed on the city wall did not intend to do anything to Sumu. In fact, there are no more guards, or rather, there are no more living guards. There were still shadows on the city wall at this time, but those figures who were staggering and moving aimlessly were definitely not living guards, but dead souls. What a city of death. Is there any other high-level undead who are one step ahead of this king or Rogris? A city exudes a strong breath of death, no vitality. Even the many guards on the city wall have fallen and turned into wandering undead. Combining all kinds of information, Sumu can basically be sure that there are no living people in this city. All living beings died with this city and turned into immortal undead. A stiff smile appeared on the face under the visor. Sumu no longer hesitated. He stepped out one step, went straight through the city wall, and appeared within the city. Then, following the information obtained from the white-robed mage, he walked steadily but quickly towards the mage tower in Rogris. This is a city full of undead. Most are skeletons. There are also zombies, ghosts, corpses and other undead of other races. Perhaps he felt the aura of the high-level undead in Sumu. When he appeared in this city, the undead not only did not attack him, but stayed away in fear. Devouring and harvesting each other is the general rule of the undead family. Not only the skeleton clan, other undead races also have this situation, but the cruelty is far less severe than the skeleton clan with the largest number and the lowest rank. All the way soon, Sumu then crossed most of the city to the vicinity of the mage tower owned by Rogris. At this point, Sumu can basically be sure that it should be Rogris who turned the city from the royal city of a principality into such a city of death, because, at this time, the mage tower belonging to Rogris was completely shrouded in a huge rune magic circle. The magic circle works. The dark runes flickered. The pitch-black chains condensed from the black mist continued to extend from the top of the mage tower, linking to all directions of the city. At the end of each chain is a small rune formation. These rune formations extended countless smaller chains of mist, penetrating the body of the undead. The magic circle was running, swallowing the breath of death in the entire city. The chains flickered, absorbing the breath of death in the body of the undead. In this way, the death breath of almost the entire city was absorbed by this mage tower and gathered together, making the death breath in this mage tower even more intense than the dungeon with the death altar. Of course, the breath of death in the dungeon comes from the plane of death and is endless. The breath of death in the mage tower comes from the vain death of all living beings in a city. After all, there is a limit. Wait until the mage tower devours all the breath of death in the city. Those undead that came from the sinking of the living creatures will also become skeletons again, only they never get a chance to get back on their feet again. Perhaps he sensed the arrival of the enemy. When Sumu appeared near the mage tower, Ragra's voice also came from the mage tower. King of Bones, you are late. I have sacrificed blood to a city, successfully transferred to the Great Lich, and stepped into the epic rank. Along with these cold and low words, a thin figure shrouded in a black robe slowly emerged from the top of the mage tower. Breeze blows. The black robe swayed slightly. Underneath the black robe, Ragra's already dry and withered body was revealed. Unlike previous incarnations, at this time, Rogers raised his head, and there was a deep under the hood, as if shrouded in black mist, and his face and expression could not be clearly seen. The only thing I can see is the twinkling light of two dots. Rodriguez's transfer was successful. At the cost of blood sacrifice to a city, he transformed from a human to a monster. At such a price, he also successfully entered the epic rank from the pinnacle of the heroic rank. The gaze in Suma's eyes flickered slightly. In the face of an epic hero, he is unafraid, but in the face of an epic rank Big Lich, he must be careful with his strength. On the mage tower, Ragra's words continued to come. Pity. Not getting an altar of death. You are just a lowly undead, and you can soar to the sky with the altar of death. If I get the altar of death, I might have become a legendary Lich King. However, it doesn't matter. As long as I kill you, I can retrieve the altar of death. I still have a chance to attack the Lich King. The Lich King. The words were full of intoxication, and Ragras, who took the initiative to transform from the living to the undead, was a little unclear. If I am successfully transferred to become the Lich King, who else is this king's opponent on this earth? Sumu sneered. Raglas completely attributed the reason for his surge in strength to the death altar. He didn't think that if the death altar really had such power, the one who guarded the death altar would be the skeleton king, who was the lord of the throne, but he didn't need to explain. Now that Raglas has appeared, then kill him. Take away the notebook containing the lost heritage. Boom. The ground paved with heavy slate smashed into pieces, and Suma's figure rose into the air, rushing towards Logris at the top of the mage tower like a black lightning. People haven't come yet. 10 dark blades of light emerged from the skeleton sword and attacked Ragras. Ragras was impressed by Suma's instant kill of the Griffin Knight, but when it was his turn to face this move, instead of being nervous, Rogers let out a sneer. Next moment, a dagger with a skull inlaid in it appeared in his hand, and he raised it slightly. Countless frost and freezing air containing the breath of death appeared around him, forming large swaths of thick ice blocks, which sealed Rogers himself and half of the mage tower. Frost imprisonment. It was originally a high-level ice spell, a pure control skill. When Rogers changed the target of imprisonment from the enemy to himself, this control skill turned into a powerful defensive skill. 10 light blades slashed. Deep traces were left on the ice that was 2 or 3 meters thick, but after all, Rogers was not injured. One move to complete the delay blocked Suma's ultimate move. Rogers' thoughts moved, and countless middle and low-level undead roared and gathered here as a lich. Moreover, it is a great lich of epic rank, and Rogers has the skills to control the undead. With the blessing of the mage tower, his control ability has been magnified tenfold. It can be said, if Rogers wants to, he can control all the undead in this dead city, with the magnifying effect of the mage tower. The undead are coming. He was originally an undead, and he was also the king of high-level undead bones. Although the number of these undead controlled by Rogers is huge, the quality cannot even keep up with his skeleton army. To know, when Rogers decided to sacrifice blood to the Ruhr King city, there were only 2 hero professionals, and less than 50 mentor-level professionals left in this city with millions of people. Except for the special job transfer like Rogers, a professional is transformed from a living to an undead, and his rank will automatically drop 1 rank. That is, among the undead in the entire Ruhr King city, there are only 2 undead of the warrior rank, and less than 50 undead of the elite rank. These undead, it doesn't even have the ability to break through Suma's own defenses. Not to mention, the effects of Suma's exclusive title, King of Bones. King of Bones, exclusive title. Stepping on the corpses of countless skeletons to rise, and finally kill the Skeleton King. You are the new king of the skeleton family. When the enemy is a skeleton family, it will be subject to the 4-fold judgment of strength, agility, constitution and spirit. Every time the judgment fails, the enemy's 4-dimensional attributes will be forced to be reduced by 10%. The largest number of undead in the City of the Dead are the skeletons. When Rogris controls them to attack Sumu, they will first receive a quadruple judgment. After this heavy sentence is decided, the 4-dimensional attributes of those poor skeletons will be directly reduced by 40%. With such a skeleton, who is qualified to be an enemy of Sumu, endless undead surged, emerging from all parts of the City of the Dead, rushing in the direction of Sumu like a tide. When the first batch of undead approached this side, Sumu sneered -413. The bones are cut with a sword. The dark red blade of light exploded quickly, and spread in the Sea of Dead, at an extremely fast speed. Just a trick. Thousands of undead were torn apart by the spreading dark red light blade, and turned into broken bones. At this moment, Suma's attribute panel also refreshed the complete kill prompts and experience point acquisition prompts. Shattered. Absolute clearing skills. This boss skill alone determines that the crowd tactics will never be able to threaten Sumu all the time. Only Rogris summoned these undead not to attack Sumu, but to delay time. Taking advantage of the gap between Suma's massacre of the Sea of the Dead, Rogris released the frost imprisonment on his body. Then, frost magic surges. A humanoid creature with a height of 3 meters and a body made of dark blue ice crawled out of the ground and appeared near Sumu. Ice spells. Summoning skills. Frost puppet. With the rank and strength of the Rogris Great Lich, this frost puppet summoned by him clearly has the strength of the Lord rank. Frost puppets have unparalleled defense and enormous power. Although he moves slowly, it was enough to restrain Sumu as a escort in front of the mage tower. After summoning the frost puppet, Rogris did not stop and continued to prepare for the next skill. Having personally experienced the death of the incarnation, he saw the Griffin Knight being torn apart with his own eyes. Even though he belittles Sumu in his mouth, Rogris never dared to despise the King of Bones. In his heart, Ubfi especially, that elusive displacement skill. The Sea of the Undead and the frost puppet can only be used as a containment. With this first layer of protection, Rogris released his skills again and again to arrange layers of frost barriers around his body as a second layer of protection. No matter how powerful displacement skills are, space is needed. As long as there is a frost barrier around him, and there is no gap left, this King of Bones cannot get close. When a King of Bones, who was good at melee combat, encountered an epic level Big Lich, who had done all the defenses and didn't give him a chance to get close, there seemed to be no suspense about the outcome of this battle. Rogris breathed a sigh of relief after he had 10 layers of frost barriers under his side. The Great Lich is a monster profession that focuses on spiritual growth. After transferring from an ice-type mage to a Big Lich, the bonus brought by the professional template alone made his magic value skyrocket several times, plus the magnifying effect brought to him by the mage tower. At this time, the magic value of Rogris is almost infinite. Unscrupulously squandering frost magic when his safety was guaranteed, Rogris began to prepare a big move. When he was still a human, he was not even qualified to release the top ice skills. The other side, frost puppets are unparalleled in defense, and it takes a lot of effort to kill Sumu. However, its speed was too slow to keep up with Suma's speed at all, so he simply left it aside and let the frost puppet slowly follow behind him. Sea of the Dead. After releasing several smashing slashes in a row, beheading tens of thousands of undead, Sumu gained a lot of experience points. There are millions of undead in the City of Death, which means a lot of experience points. If he can kill all these undead, even with a severe experience penalty, Suma's level can be raised again by several levels. But 1/20th of the stamina will be consumed to release a smashing slash. With all the calculations, he could at best unleash 20 air smashing slashes. If you add the death cut and the stamina reserve for Rogris, and release 5 more air slashes, it is already his limit. 5 smashing slashes means tens of thousands of undead. Compared to the Sea of the Undead, which still has nearly 1 million left, it is only a fraction. Compared with physical strength, magic power is not lacking. He himself has more than 30,000 magic points, plus the 100,000 magic points stored in the soul crystal. Even if he releases the use of phase shift, he does not need to worry about the depletion of magic points. Looking at Rogris, who was protected by the heavy frost barrier, Sumu had a headache. If it is possible, he would rather face 10 epic heroes with physical attacks than an epic Big Lich. High-level undead are extremely difficult to deal with. You must know that a high-level undead like a Lich can learn and even create skills independently. A high-level demon with a long accumulation of time, no one knows how many skills he has mastered and how many trump cards he has hidden. When a Lich appears in the world, even if 10 times the number of human heroes join forces to encircle and suppress it, there is no guarantee that it will be killed. The same goes for Rodriguez. It was just that he had just transferred to the Great Lich, which brought so much trouble to Sumu if he was allowed to escape from here. With the accumulation of time, he had digested the background of his time as a human, and he was able to research and create his own new skills. At that time, even Sumu could not guarantee that he was still his opponent. Rogris must die. The notebook that records the lost inheritance must also be obtained, consuming 1,000 mana points to summon a skeleton army to help him resist and kill the sea of undead that is still coming in. Sumu opened his attribute panel. Death Cut, Shattered, Phase Shift, Summoned Skeletons, Death Halo, Undead Transformation, Bone Prison. That's all the skills Sumu has at the moment. The 4 skills in front passed by, and Sumu looked directly at the 3 skills in the back. Undead Transformation is a purely auxiliary skill, which is useless for the current situation he is facing, so put it aside. The only 2 skills left are Death Aura and Bone Prison. Death Halo, as the core skill of the Death Knight, the function of this skill is that, when it is turned on, it can convert its own magic value into the power of death, and continuously erode the enemy within a certain range, weakening its health value and defense ability. Maybe it's because it's an advanced skill, or maybe it's because Sumu doesn't have enough free points, and after acquiring this skill, he hasn't been able to level up with free points. For now, Death Aura is useful, but not very useful. The last skill, Bone Prison, a control skill. Taking a look at the free points he currently has, Sumu directly consumes the free points and evolves this skill, which has been upgraded to level 9, into a boss skill. Hand of Imprisonment, active skill, upper level skill of Bone Prison, cannot be upgraded. Consuming 1,000 mana points, a big hand made of bones is protruded from the ground, and the enemy is imprisoned in it. During the imprisonment, the space near the enemy the fluctuation is disturbed, and space skills or props cannot be used. Continuous output of magic value can perform certain operations on the imprisoned hand. Control Imprisoned Hands, the 5th boss skill. Looking at the system's description of the Hand of Imprisonment, the soulfire in Sumu's eyes flickered slightly. Sustainable control. There was an idea in his mind. Sumu is preparing. Rodriguez is also preparing. When Sumu consumed free points, and evolved the Bone Prison into his 5th boss skill, the top skill that Rogris spent a long time guiding was finally ready. The near-inexhaustible amount of frost magic spreads around Logris and the Mage's Tower. Temperature plummets, air freeze, tiny ice crystals spread over every inch of space, within a radius of thousands of meters. Let out a long breath. Having completed all the preparations, Rogris raised the bone staff in his hand, and pointed in the direction of Sumu. Next moment, Frost Magic Burst, the Endless Forest. With Rogris and the Mage Tower as the center, it spreads forward rapidly. With Rogris and the Mage Tower under his feet as the center, endless icy cold spreads out. Air condensation. Earth freezes. At a speed visible to the naked eye, countless tiny ice crystals appeared in the air. The water vapor in the air was frozen and turned into it, and fell to the ground, making a crisp and dense collision sound. Because long before the water vapor in the air froze, the ground had been covered with frost at some point, not just the environment. When the endless ice cold seemed to spread from the polar regions, the frost puppet was frozen. The skeleton army under Sumu was frozen, and the countless undead in the City of Death were also frozen. The cold spread quickly. Looking down from the sky, with Rogris and the Mage Tower under his feet as the center, a piece of ice blue spread out at an extremely fast speed, spreading towards the entire city. Wherever the icy cold spreads, whether it is the air, the earth, the buildings, or the undead wandering in the city, all of them are frozen by the cold air and covered with a layer of ice blue. There are no exceptions. Polar Ice, that's the name of this skill. As one of the top skills in ice spells, Polar Ice Cold is an anti-city skill. When a skill is released, even a city can be easily frozen. One can imagine the power of this skill. Among the ice spells, only the power of the forbidden spell, Frozen 1,000 Miles, can surpass the polar ice. Corresponding to its power, it is a huge consumption. At the peak of the hero's rank, Rogris, who is an ice magician, is not qualified to release this skill. When he was transferred to the Great Lich, and stepped into the epic rank, although Rogris, whose mana value soared several times, met the release requirements of the polar ice, it was difficult to maintain it for a long time. Only with the help of the Mage Tower, and the almost endless magic power as support, did he successfully release this top-level skill, and freeze a city. In terms of power, even though the Polar Ice Cold is a city-to-city skill, rather than a single-target attack skill, all enemies within its attack range will be attacked by the extreme cold air that can freeze the air at all times. The power of this extreme cold is absolutely no less than the skill attack, continuously released by an epic caster. From the release of the polar ice, Rogris desperately extracted the magic power from the Mage Tower to maintain the extreme cold air. It was not until his own magic power, was about to be exhausted that he stopped releasing the extreme cold at this time. This frozen world has expanded from the Mage Tower to the edge of the city. Everything was covered with a thick layer of ice, which turned the former Roar King City, and later the City of Death, into the current frozen city. Even Sumu, there was an extra layer of ice several feet thick on his body. Should be, are you dead? After all, he is not even sure that he will survive this level of indiscriminate attack, let alone a despicable undead, who only entered the Lord's rank after a bad luck. Looking at the frozen Sumu, Rogris breathed a sigh of relief. The King of Bones is dead. The Roar King City was also sacrificed by his blood. Next, as long as he finds the Soul Crystal and the Death Altar that were taken away by the King of Bones, he can fly far away, sneak into the depths of the unknown mountains, and seek to go one step further and become the Lich King. As long as he successfully enters the legendary stage, no one in this world can threaten him. This is Rogris' vision, beautiful as always. What? Crack clap. Before Rogris stepped down from the Mage Tower, a crisp shattering sound suddenly came. He followed the reputation and saw that cracks appeared on the several foot thick ice, on the King of Bones who had been frozen in the first place. The cracks are getting bigger and bigger. It exploded under the gaze of Rogers. The King of Bones Sumu is back in his sights. So close. With his own tyrannical strength, he broke free from the shackles of the ice layer and got out. Sumu was a little scared. He had done his best to be careful. Even when the freezing air of Nasenhan hit, a direct phase shift appeared hundreds of meters away only. He didn't expect Rogris to release an anti-city skill as soon as he came up, directly targeting the entire city. There was no room for him to escape at all. He didn't even expect that Rogris could even release the top skills like Polar Ice Cold, just by transferring to the class of the Great Lich. A Polar Ice Cold, extreme freezing damage for dozens of seconds. It directly caused Suma's blood volume to drop below 1/3, and his skeleton armor was also covered with fine cracks, as if it would shatter with a slight movement. Fine. His physique is high enough, his health bar is long enough, and his armor is thick enough. When the blood volume drops below 1/3, the duration of the Polar Ice Cold ends. He came through, breaking free from the thick layer of ice. Sumu breathed a sigh of relief. This should be Rogris' strongest trump card. The polar ice that can easily destroy even a city. If this is not the strongest chassis of Rogris, he is not an epic boss who has just been transferred to the Great Lich, or the Lich King who has stepped into the legendary rank. Rogris is still on the Mage Tower. There are layers of frost barriers around him. When Rogris released another skill, Sumu stepped forward and avoided the bombardment of this skill with a phase shift. He appeared on the other side of the Mage Tower. Then, without hesitation, he unleashed the boss skill he had just acquired, the Hand of Imprisonment. 1000 mana consumption. In the screams of Rogris, a big hand composed entirely of tiny bones suddenly rushed out from the underground of the Mage Tower, dashing wildly upwards. 1000 mana points are just the initial conditions for releasing this skill. When Sumu increased the output of mana, the hand of the skeleton became bigger and bigger, and the speed of the upward thrust was also getting faster and faster. Under the horrified gaze of Rogers, the big skeleton hand, which has grown enough to have a radius of dozens of meters, completely grabbed the upper half of the Mage Tower, protected by layers of frost barriers. It is also difficult for this big skeleton to hurt Rogris. However, Sumu released this skill, not to hurt him. 10,000 mana points are instantly burned. Under the control of Sumu, the skeleton hand that grabbed the Mage Tower clenched tightly, and with all his strength, he picked up half of the Mage Tower from the tower, and threw it dozens of meters away. Wow! The big hand of the skeleton collapsed, and it turned into countless tiny bones, and submerged into the earth. The half of the Mage Tower, and the Rogris inside it also crashed down at this time, hitting the ground full of hard ice. The Mage Tower was destroyed. The biggest benefit is that Rogris loses an almost endless amount of mana, even with the layers of frost barriers on his body. There are only a few layers left. His own magic power is almost exhausted, and he has lost the support of the Mage Tower. Even if Rogris is not dead, it is actually not far away suffered a loss. Naturally, Sumu would not let Rogris release his skills again. When Rogris' figure emerged from the broken and collapsed half of the Mage's Tower, he had already stepped out and appeared behind Rogris. Death cut. The damage of 20 times the normal attack exploded in an instant, and the frost barriers surrounding Rogris were shattered layer by layer. Before Rogris can make up the broken frost barrier, Sumu, who was already close, raised his sword and fell. Cold light flashed. Rogris' withered head fell to the ground. Beheading is not safe for a lich. Even if only the head is left, he may have other ways to release his skills. Even if its head and body are all destroyed, it may not be able to kill it. The best way to kill a lich is to find its fate, and destroy the phylactery together with the soul hidden in it, so that it can be completely obliterated. Where is the phylactery of Rogris? Sumu doesn't know. He has a better way. After decapitating Roger's head, Sumu rushed forward and picked up the dry, aching head. Under Roger's terrified gaze, Suma's right hand, covering his hands, was attached to his head. Erosion, talent activated. Unknown energy gradually poured in. Because it is only a head and does not need to erode the body, the unknown energy pours in very fast this time, and the erosion speed to Rogers is also very fast. What is this? 412. Having personally experienced an influx of unknown energy that began to erode his soul and strip his memory, Rogers was terrified. But no matter how he screamed, it was difficult to avoid the result of being eroded. Scenes and scenes emerged from Suma's eyes. This is Rogers' memory. Since it is the main body, the memory that Sumu reads this time is extremely complete. It not only includes the various skills that Rogers learned, but also how he got the notebook, how to learn the secret art from it, and how to change his career to become an archlick. For Sumu, this memory is invaluable, because he was pleasantly surprised to discover that many of the skills in Rogers' memory were all he could learn. Not that Sumu couldn't learn skills through memory erosion. Instead, he can only learn the skills that the undead family can release. For example, Frost Blast, for example, Frost Barrier, for example, Polar Ice. These skills that Rogers still retains after he transferred from Ice Mage to Arch Lich are all within the range that Sumu can learn. Don't say anything else. This string of skills alone makes Suma's adventure worth it. Unknown energies are eroding Rogers' soul. Sumu was reading Rogers' memory carefully, not wanting to let go of any detail. What about Rogers? Panic, fear, despair. Various negative emotions flooded his mind, because he was horrified to find that after that feeling of memory being watched, he was gradually losing control of his soul. Necromancers are already able to manipulate souls. Liches are experts at controlling souls. It can be said that there is no race in this world that understands the soul better than the Lich. So Rogers clearly knew that he was sinking. He is gradually losing control of his soul, and gradually gaining obedience to Sumu. When his soul is completely out of control, he will not die, but will become an archlet completely controlled by Sumu. In front of Sumu, he didn't have the slightest secret. Suma's order. He could not make any resistance even. As long as this king of skeletons has a thought, his soul will disintegrate itself, completely disappearing from this world from an epic great lich that was originally immortal. This result, Rogers, is unacceptable. After all, it was a legendary boss who grew into a natural disaster mage in his previous life, and Rogers still insisted a little. He would rather die here than be a puppet completely controlled by the King of Bones. So, when he felt that his soul was about to get out of control completely, Rogers resolutely blew himself up and destroyed his soul. The screen stopped abruptly. Sumu, who had just learned the skill of Polar Ice, looked at the head in his hands with regret. No need to destroy lives. He has been prompted by the system. This time, Rogers is really dead. Slavery failed. You killed the Archlick Logris Salmon. You gained 600,000 experience points. You got the skill Ice Spike. You gained the skill Ice Gun. You got the skill Frost Blast. You got the skill Frost Barrier. You gained the skill Frost Armor. You got the skill Frost Nova. You gained the skill Pole Chill. You have obtained the transfer information of Epic Occupation Template, Grand Lich. There are 7 skills in total. All are Ice Caster skills. Gaining 7 skills at once is something that Sumu has never done before, although I haven't learned all the skills of the Rogers Society, but these 7 skills from low to high are almost a complete inheritance of the Ice Magician profession. Greatly enriched Suma's skill arsenal. The harvest of these 7 skills alone makes Sumu worthwhile. Taking a look at the 7 skills he had just acquired, Sumu turned his attention to the corpse of Rogers. Erosion. Talent is activated again. Absorb the essence from the corpse. When the corpse of Rogers turned into ashes and fell on the ground covered with ice, Suma's mind also sounded the system prompt sound again. You have absorbed the essence of the corpse, and your body has become stronger. Your mental strength has increased by 1,000 points. Not bad. Although the other 3 attributes have not been increased, the 1,000 points of spiritual attributes greatly make up for the lack of Suma's spiritual attributes. Nod slightly. After glancing at the last traces left by Rogers, Sumu walked towards the half-collapsed mage tower. Having obtained Rogers' memory, Sumu naturally knew the whereabouts of that notebook at this time. The notebook containing the lost inheritance was buried in the ruins of the mage tower. Skeleton Mo knife frequently chopped out. Pieces of gravel are either opened or thrown away. When the rubble brought by the collapse of the mage tower was cleaned up, an exquisite stone platform also appeared in front of Sumu. The notebook that he has been thinking about for a long time is inlaid in the center of the stone platform. This is a note. It is also a lost legacy. It is a prop that contains the pure breath of death. It was the breath of death, contained in this notebook that led to the blood sacrifice of a city in such a short period of time, turning all the residents of the Roar King city into undead to maintain his job transfer needs. Rogris has been in contact with this notebook for too long, and found nothing unusual. But Sumu, who had read his memory, clearly felt that the future heavenly destruction mage was influenced by this notebook to a certain extent. Looking at the delicate notebook wrapped in a trace of mist, Sumu did not rush to open it. Perhaps, is this notebook a trap in itself? After thinking for a while, Sumu took a few steps forward. His right palm, which was covered with the gauntlet, was lightly attached to the pitch-black note, and eroded, talent activated, unknown energy slowly flows out. It poured into the notebook through his right palm, and began to erode this notebook that contained a lot of inheritance. No matter what traps there are in this notebook, whether it has the imprint of a higher level existence, or simply a remnant of a higher level existence, as long as Sumu erodes it with his own talent, this notebook is no longer in danger. Time passed slowly. Erosion of this notebook is much slower than Sumu imagined, even slower than he erodes and enslaves a monster across 2 steps. But Sumu is in no hurry. The slower the erosion, the higher the value of the note. Finally, when half an hour passed, the unknown energy finally completely eroded this notebook. Next moment, the crisp system prompt sounded in his mind again. Ding! You have acquired the skill Undead Transformation. You have opened the Undead Transformation skill tree. You have obtained the transfer information of Legendary Profession Template, Lich King. Legendary Occupation Template, Lich King. If you add the Lord Job Template, Lich, and the Epic Job Template, Grand Lich, which were obtained from Rogris before, Sumu has assembled a complete set of undead job templates. That is to say, this notebook is indeed a lost legacy. What it contains is a whole set of Lich inheritance. Lord rank, Lich. Epic tier, Arch Lich. Legendary rank, Lich King. It can be said, if Sumu is willing, he can now be transferred to become an Epic Arch Lich. From a low-level undead race with a racial cap, a skeleton, to a top-level undead race with almost no upper limit, a Lich. And, when his attributes grow further, it won't be difficult to change jobs to become the Lich King again. Yes, perhaps it was because, when he was transferred to Darth Vader King, he had already integrated into the career template of the Lich clan. When he obtained the career template of the Great Lich, Sumu found that he could directly change careers. Pity. There was some regret on Sumu's face. Having tasted the sweetness of professional integration, he doesn't want to give up this halfway through. Transfer Lich is powerful. The Lich King is almost invincible, but Sumu believes more in his 01's talent. He believed that, when he merged a number of legendary career templates comparable to the Lich King, and created his own legendary career template, it would be the strongest and most suitable for himself. Put the 2 career templates aside for now. Sumu checked other information. Undead Transformation. Originally eroding the incarnation of Rogris, Sumu had already obtained a Undead Transformation, and this time he eroded the note. He had obtained an Undead Transformation again. Repeat twice. The only 2 differences are, 1. Undead Transformation is lit up. In other words, he can use free points to improve the level of this auxiliary skill in the future. 2. The Undead Transformation skill tree has been opened. With a thought, Sumu opened his attribute panel. I don't know when. There is a secondary interface on his property panel. The auxiliary skill of Undead Transformation is still located in the skill bar of his first level interface, but a new page has appeared next to the original attribute panel. It was the Undead Transformation skill tree he had just acquired. At this time, there are only 3 skills on this page, arranged from bottom to top. They are Living Corpse, Walking Corpse, Zombie. Officially, Sumu got the transformation information of the 3 ranks of the zombie family from the incarnation of Rogris. When Sumu's eyes focus on the skill of Living Corpse, information about how to transform a life or a corpse into a living corpse will appear in Sumu's mind. When he focused his attention on the 2 skills, Walking Corpse and Zombie, related transformation information would also appear in his mind. This is the Undead Transformation skill tree. Sumu knew it. His Undead Transformation is only level 1, and in the Undead Transformation skill tree, only the skill, Living Corpse, is active, indicating that his current Undead Transformation level only supports him in transforming a creature or a corpse. Living Corpse. That becomes a basic rank. When the skill level of the Undead Transformation technique is improved, he can transform the higher level undead such as Walking Corpses and Zombies. Undead Transformation. This is clearly in the category of Lich. Among the many high-level undead known to Sumu, only the Lich race is keen on studying Undead Transformation, no doubt. If you want to improve the Undead Transformation technique, you need to invest a lot of time in researching the body structure, occupation information, and soul structure of various undead. Not so with Sumu. With the existence of free points, a lich, even the Lich King, needs to spend a lot of time and meticulous research to improve the undead transformation, and he can improve it in minutes. 22 o'clock. This is the number of free points that Sumu currently has. Looking at this newly opened secondary page, Sumu couldn't help but put some of his free points into the transformation of the undead to increase the level of this auxiliary skill. But when a full 10 free points are put into it, the level of the undead transformation will be raised from level 1 to level 2 on the secondary page. In addition to the living corpses of the basic rank, the walking corpses of the advanced rank are also lit up and activated. Loss. Seeing this scene, Sumu felt a little distressed. 10 free points is enough to upgrade a common skill to full level. The point of the undead transformation technique is to allow him to transform the walking corpse of the advanced stage. In the long run, the value of undead transformation is immeasurable, but for Sumu at the moment, it's just a tasteless rib. He has no shortage of advanced zombie brothers. A boss skill, skeleton summoning, can allow Sumu to summon tens of thousands of skeleton legions, including not only advanced skeletons, but also elite skeletons and warrior skeletons. Why did he go to transform zombies himself? At least, before stepping into the legendary rank, the skill of undead transformation was not very useful to Sumu. When his strength is no longer advanced, and when he is ready to develop his power, it is when this auxiliary skill can really play its role. Close the properties panel. Sumu looked at the notebook again. After being eroded by the erosion talent, there is no danger in this notebook. The inheritance inside has been obtained by Sumu, and the remaining value of this notebook is the information recorded in it. Pick up your notes and flip through the pages. After reviewing all the information recorded in the notes, Sumu couldn't help sighing. Rodriguez was pitted. In addition to the legacy and skills that Sumu has acquired, as well as some information on the Lich, this notebook also records an arcane technique, which is how Rogris created his avatar. According to the records of the secret art, if you want to create an avatar that can be used as a second body, the first thing you have to do is to tear your own soul. Most of the souls live in the body, and the torn souls are thrown into the incarnation, and they are refined by the secret methods recorded in the secret art, and finally the incarnation that Sumu has seen can be formed. Incarnation is the ability that only demigods, and even gods, can have. For a demigod or even a deity, a single thought of them can generate an incarnation, which not only communicates with the deity, but also carries a part of the deity's power, which is infinitely useful. Its power is still above the projection of demigods and gods. These 417 secret techniques created a way of shaping the avatar by trickery, but at the cost of splitting one's own soul. The soul is torn apart and no longer complete. Wanting to continue to break through has become an illusion. At the beginning, after obtaining this notebook, Rogris did not endure the temptation brought by the incarnation secret technique, and created an incarnation, which also made it difficult for him to break through when he was stuck at the peak of the heroic rank. When he realized this, it was irreversible. And there is a solution to this problem in the notes, that is to change careers to become a lich, or even a big lich. The lich's phylactery is to tear apart part of the soul hidden in it, as the final means of the lich resurrection. Being able to tear apart his own soul at will, the lich will naturally be able to reunite it. So, accepting the inheritance in the notes and transferring to a lich, or a big lich, became the only choice for Rogris. One wrong step, step by step. It was just getting this notebook containing the lost inheritance that led to the end of Rogris. But speak up. A thought suddenly popped into Suma's mind. The heavenly destruction mage in the previous life, is it really Rogris? Perhaps the necromancer who appeared in the player's field of vision and caused natural disasters of the undead again and again was Rogris. The body hidden behind the necromancer, the great lich of the epic rank, or even the Lich King of the legendary rank. Is it really Rogers? Or maybe the body hidden behind the scenes has long been replaced by the existence that wrote this notebook. Once this thought emerged from my mind, it never lingered. Sumu feels faintly. This is the truth of the past. After realizing this, even as an undead, Sumu felt a chill, as if a fine layer of cold sweat seeped out from his body. Fine. He is cautious enough. Not like Rogers. He took the initiative to open this notebook and read this notebook. Fine. Erosion. The talent is enough to defy the sky. Even the backhand left by an existence that is likely to be a legendary rank also made him crack it unknowingly. Corroded by the erosion talent, except for all the imprints in it. The heritage contained in it was also acquired by Sumu. This black notebook has really become a notebook, and no longer has other powers and hidden dangers. At best, the notebook is tough enough that even today's Sumu has some difficulty destroying it. It is worth mentioning that, after Rogris was transferred to the Grand Lich, the phylactery he chose was this notebook. I have to say, he has a good eye. At least in terms of tenacity, Mu has not encountered a more suitable life than this notebook. Think about it, Mu will throw the notebook in his storage space. Maybe one day, he will use this notebook. Having obtained the inheritance, skills and information contained in the notes, Suma's mission this time can be said to have been successfully completed. After searching the Mage Tower in Rogris, and throwing some things that he might use into the storage space, Mu was ready to leave here. Rogers is dead. The Mage Tower has also been destroyed. Without the support of magic power, the Polar Ice skill that Rogers released has long since stopped, but after all, it is a top-level city-to-city skill. Even if it loses the follow-up magic support, it will take a long time for this completely frozen city to melt. In comparison, Mu prefers the city as it is now. Now the Roar King City, everything is shrouded in a layer of ice blue. The sun shines, and the whole city looks like a crystal city, which is magnificent and colorful. If the ice melts, those undead who have been killed by the extreme cold will not stand up again, but a city of death full of skeletons, corpses and rotting corpses is not as beautiful as the city of crystals, is not it? Take a little meal. Glancing at the dead city, Mu hurried in the direction of Giant Rock City without looking back. This is not long after Mu left. On the central square of the Roar King City, a vague shadow quietly emerged from the side of the Resurrection Stone tablet, and it became clearer and clearer, and slowly turned into a human image. This is the player. As the royal city of the Roar Principality, players are naturally born in this big city, with a population of 1 million. Not only are there, but there are quite a few. When Rogris chose to use the notebook as the source, when the blood sacrificed a city and transferred to the Great Lich, the breath of death spread throughout the city, and the many players in the Roar King City also died inexplicably along with the residents of the city, corrupted by the breath of death. Early in the game, all player deaths have a 1-hour cooldown. The number of players in the Roar King City cannot be compared with that of the Aborigines, but there are still 20,000 to 30,000 players. The inexplicable death of 20,000 to 30,000 players returned to the game login interface, which was naturally difficult for them to accept, like the players who were slaughtered by the skeleton core under Mu before. These players also flocked to the forum to vent their dissatisfaction with the game company by posting curses and other methods. After the 1-hour cooldown ended, these players who were immersed in the forum returned to the game login interface at the first time, ready to return to the game world. Game companies ignore player protests at this point. During these 3 days of protests, players have long known the so-called protest is nothing but a vent. When the cooldown of the game resurrection is over, they naturally have to return to the game world quickly to see what caused their death, and by the way, see what measures are available to make up for it. Then, the scene from before appeared. A player appeared from the vicinity of the resurrection steel, and was stunned at the first sight of the surrounding environment. Where is this? I crossed. Unable to help, he opened the map and glanced at the spatial coordinates of his location. The first resurrected player was even more stunned. This is indeed the Roar King City. It was fine here when I died. Why now? Not just him. When more and more players returned to the game world, and appeared from around the Resurrection Stone tablet, they also fell into this shock. A city of crystals, under the sunlight, a city of crystals that was indescribable in words, and a city of crystals that could never have appeared in the real world, appeared in front of their eyes. How so? What happened here? After a long time, finally, a player woke up from this splendid brilliance and looked in other directions. There are many ice sculptures in the alleys of the city, and the countless ice sculptures are also part of the refracting sunlight and exuding brilliant brilliance. These ice sculptures have different shapes and still maintain a running attitude. It was as if these ice sculptures were originally going to rush in one direction, and then they were frozen in a very short period of time, turning into the ice sculptures in front of them. They're just going to go in one direction. Although the ice layer on the ice sculpture is thick, it does not block everything inside. Careful observation. There will always be players who find that these ice sculptures are not pure ice sculptures. Inside each ice sculpture, there is a figure frozen in ice, a spirit figure. Gudong. A player swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said with some difficulty, the residents of the Roar King City have all become undead. After our death, there must have been a war in the Roar King City. It was this war that turned all the residents of the Roar King City into undead, and it was this war that froze the entire Roar King City, along with the undead in it. This is just the player's guess, but it has aroused the approval of countless players. After confirming this, a new problem arises. What kind of war between existences can freeze an entire city and turn it into a crystal city? Who else? dare to cast a spell in the royal city of a human duchy, transforming an entire city's inhabitants into undead. To know, there is also an order among the various countries in the game world. Even if there is a war between two countries that are mortal enemies, massacres will rarely occur, not to mention the transformation of the residents of an entire city into undead. Unable to help, a name emerged from the minds of these many players. King of Bones. Perhaps, only the King of Skeletons who lived in 3 cities in a row had the ability to freeze an entire city. Only the high-level undead, who stepped out of the dead world, can transform the residents of an entire city into undead. After realizing this, these players are not in a hurry to level up. The whole city is frozen, and they can't improve their level by taking quests. They take pictures and videos like crazy. After saving enough materials, he went offline as soon as possible, returned to the official forum of Second World, and posted everything he saw and guessed on the forum. Did Zhao, 20 to 30,000 players posted together to discuss one thing? Coupled with the countless beautiful photos and videos, the Frozen City incident was instantly posted on the official forum, attracting a large number of players to watch and discuss. When the players of the Giant Rock City also appeared, it was confirmed that the King of Bones killed an epic Griffin Knight in seconds, and after killing all the high-level NPCs in the Giant Rock City, he left the Giant Rock City and rushed towards the direction of the Ruhr King City. Later, the King of Bones is the shaper of the Frozen City and the City of the Dead, and this matter has become a stone hammer among players. As for the King of Bones, he used a physical attack to kill the Griffin Knight, and he used a large-scale ice spell when freezing the Ruhr King City. Players said, "What kind of boss is a boss without legal skills?" The King of Bones was originally a legal boss. It's just that its previous opponent was too weak to let it release legal skills. However, under the complete evidence chain of many players, Sumu, the King of Bones, became the shaper of the Frozen City and the City of Death, and also became the first boss-level scapegoat in the history of the game. What? You destroyed the Ruhr King City. Your fame gradually spread in the human kingdom. You gain 1 reputation. The list of natural disasters is open. Your reputation is not enough, and you have not been able to enter the natural disasters list. When returning from the Ruhr King City to the Giant Rock City, Sumu's mind sounded the system prompt again, but this time, the content of the system prompt made Sumu stunned. It's obviously Rogris who destroyed the Ruhr Royal City. Why should he be detained on my head? Whether it is to change the profession of blood sacrifice, to turn the Ruhr King City into a city of death, or to kill Sumu, to turn the City of Death into a frozen city with polar ice, all of them are Rogris' handwriting. In the process, the only thing Sumu did was to kill Rogris. In a sense, he killed Rogris, the epic Great Lich, and avenged the residents of the Ruhr King City. Why did the Ruhr King City's destroyed hat go to his head instead? Sumu was a little incomprehensible. It stands to reason that even if all the inhabitants of the royal city of Ruhr die, there is no one eyewitness to the battle between him and Rogris, but the rules of the game are everywhere. It makes no sense that even the system of the game world could mistake the real culprit who destroyed the Ruhr Castle. The only possibility is, the players who were born in the Ruhr King City have been resurrected, and the crime of destroying the Ruhr King City has been pinned on his head. Through the dissemination of players, the Aborigines in the game world generally accepted this fact. Then, only then has the system prompt he just received. If you are an ordinary person, you may only see these few system prompts, but as a former legendary player, a reborn who has personally experienced the coming of the gods and destroyed the reality of this huge disaster, Sumu thought more. That is to say, the system god that players generally recognize does not exist at all. The game rules of Second World are automatic operation. Even if there is an existence above the game rules, who controls all the game rules, he can only run within the game rules, and cannot actively interfere with the game content. So, the general perception of players and Aboriginal people can change the rules of the game. As long as I do it right, I may not be able to get huge benefits from it. As for the list of natural disasters and legends, this is better understood. The popularity is the popularity of what monsters, NPCs or players do among the creatures. The higher the legend, the greater the sensation and influence of what it has done. The natural disaster list is a list specially open for monsters. The basic condition for being on the list is to get at least 1 reputation. Second World is very large. Even in the early stage of the game, dozens of servers have been opened, corresponding to dozens of continents. The monsters recorded in the natural disaster list are not aimed at one continent, but are aimed at all the boss-level existences with names and surnames in all the continents that have been opened. The ranking of the natural disaster list is only 100. This has led to the fact that every monster boss that enters the natural disaster list must not only make enough sensational deeds and gain enough fame, but also be strong enough. According to the memory of Suma's previous life, even the last place in the natural disaster list is a monster boss with the epic rank peak, past life. Even if he stepped into the legendary rank and caused the undead natural disaster on most of the continents, Rogers only briefly rushed to the 10th place on the natural disaster list. 10th down, the rank of the natural disaster boss may be a legendary rank, or it may be the pinnacle of an epic rank, but 10th and up, all natural disaster boss is the existence that has entered the sanctuary. Among them, there is no shortage of destroying a country, or even destroying a small world by their own power. Of course, the ranking of the natural disaster list is only 100, not to say that the dozens of continents in the entire game world add up. There are only less than 100 legendary bosses. Some monster bosses are only the pinnacle of epic rank, but if they have done enough deeds, they may be included in the natural disaster list. Some monster bosses may have entered the sanctuary, but they have no interest in destroying human beings and other creatures. If there is no legend, naturally it will not be on the list after all. Whether it is the undead like Sumu, or the more numerous beast-like monster bosses, as long as they step into the Lord rank, they will have wisdom no less than that of human beings. Some monster bosses choose to siege the city to quickly improve their strength. Naturally, there are many monster bosses who choose to hide and live their lives leisurely. That is it. After digesting the information in his mind, Sumu put it aside for a while. Whether it can be on the list of natural disasters is good and bad for monsters' benefit. At least one has to step into the legendary rank, and only one boss can enjoy the benefits brought by the natural disaster list. The downside is more immediate. The higher the popularity, the easier it is to attract the crusade of heroes from other races. For example, if Sumu had been on the Scourge list before the attack on the rock, it would be more than just a Griffin Knight in front of him, possibly plural epic heroes. If he ranks higher on the natural disaster list, even attacking a human principality may lead to the crusade of legendary heroes. The natural disaster list is a bit like the most wanted list of all monsters by humans. The higher the ranking of the monster, the greater the threat, the easier it is to attract the attention of human heroes, and the easier it is to cause human heroes to crusade. Suma's current strength is equivalent to an epic monster boss. After acquiring a series of skills from Rogers, his strength increased sharply again. Even now, he doesn't want to be picked up by many epic heroes, or legendary heroes if it is possible. He even hopes to appear in front of the world with an invincible attitude after stepping into the epic stage, or even the legendary stage. Sweeping the entire continent, it took Sumu about 2 hours in total to rush from the giant rock city to the Roar King city, kill Rogers, and then rush back to the giant rock city from the Roar King city. When he left, the core of skeletons under his command had already rushed into the giant rock city, massacred the residents and players in the city, and when Sumu returned, the war was not over yet. After all, it is a large city with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants, and the army of bones brought by Sumu was only tens of thousands. It will take about an hour or two to turn all the residents and players in the giant rock city into experience points. Sumu returns. The passive effect that disappeared from the Skeleton Legion because of his departure also reappeared. The power of the Lord comes with it, making the slaughter efficiency of the Skeleton Legion once again improved at this time. But Sumu has a new idea. In the 417 city, there are still players alive. He stepped out, went straight from the city wall of the giant rock city, appeared behind a player who was hurriedly dodging the skeleton's attack, but still remembered to shoot, and lifted him up. The body was in the air, and the player was startled at first when he found out that he was caught by a tall warrior, who was shrouded in black heavy armor, and only 2 red awns emanated from under the visor. The player was pleasantly surprised. By this time, Suma's image was well known. This player naturally knows that this tall figure, who lifts himself with one hand, is the culprit of the massacre at the moment, the King of Bones. Players do not die. Even if you were killed, you just wait an hour before entering the game, so he will not be afraid. On the contrary, being caught by the King of Bones in person is a great honor for this ordinary player. Before this, no one has ever approached Sumu, and naturally no one has been able to take a photo of him at close range in images. And now, he was held by the King of Bones with one hand, only a few dozen centimeters away from the King of Bones. At this distance, the player's first reaction was not to think what the King of Bones would do to himself, but to frantically take pictures of Sumu while keeping the video. 1 hour cooldown only. If you die, you die. But the opportunity to take such close-up shots is unique. Realizing this, the player's face was full of ecstasy. Laozi is going to be famous. The player's reaction to this, Sumu can only ignore. As a former player, he knew exactly what this player was doing. If the positions of the two were switched, I'm afraid Suma's actions would not be much better than this player. Ignoring the player's strange reaction, Sumu pinched the player's head and activated the erosion talent. That's right. After eroding skeletons, eroding high-level undead, and eroding human professionals, Sumu turns the eroded objects to players for the first time. He wanted to know, can his talent act on the player, and if so, what will the player, who is eroded by him, look like? The player is definitely one of the biggest secrets in the gaming world. Before that, even with such an idea, Sumu never thought of really eroding a player, because this is equivalent to peeping into the deepest secrets of the entire game world. That is, after realizing that the so-called system god is just a collection of game rules, and can only operate within the scope allowed by the game rules, he dared to erode the players, because he has been determined, even if he did such a behavior, the so-called system god could not interfere with him, corrode the undead and enslave it. Erosion of living beings will turn them into undead. So, what about eroding a player? Will it be enslaved? Or will the player's body be transformed into an undead? Or will the player die? And after Ray entering the game, everything will be the same. With a mood of anticipation, Sumu began the first erosion of the player. Unknown energy poured out and slowly entered the body of the player, who was still taking pictures. Sumu clearly felt that he was gradually gaining control of the player. This process seems to be no different from when he eroded the undead and eroded the living. Unknown energy can enter, which means that he can erode the player slowly. The more unknown energy poured in, the player's body, like those creatures eroded by Sumu, began to become dry marks and lose their vitality. It is shown on the player's status bar that he has obtained a negative buff. No surprises. Sumu successfully eroded the home's body only when he controlled the unknown energy to flow toward the player's head, and was about to erode the player's soul. He encountered an obstacle for the first time. Yes, zero. Obstruct. It seems that there is a force protecting the soul of the player, preventing the intrusion of any force. Not that it cannot be eroded, but extremely slow. Sumu estimated that if he wanted to break through that barrier and truly invade the player's soul, he would have to maintain this state for at least dozens of days. Really? Can erode? The light in his eyes flickered, and Suma's heart was a little shocked. Even if it takes dozens of days, it means that the erosion talent can really break through the shackles of the rules of the game and let him erode a player. This means, to a certain extent, the power of erosion talent is even above the rules of the game. He is now a lord, and it takes dozens of days to erode a player. What if he stepped into an epic stage, or even a legendary stage? Did he wait until his rank crossed, and his strength was improved 1,000 times? It's easy to erode players. For a time, Sumu was a little shocked and a little excited. If there is such a day, that means that the player is not only the natural enemy of the monster, nor the experience pack he values, but more likely to become a part of his power. Boom, a crisp sound. Sumu, who had completed the verification, squeezed the player's head with a slight force. For the undead transformation technique to really play a role, it requires him to step into the legendary rank, entering the natural disaster list, and the blessing of the 5.5 monster boss on the natural disaster list also requires him to step into the legendary rank now. The erosion of players requires him to further improve his rank and strength. Sumu couldn't wait. Running rampant in the human world and devouring cities and towns can only allow him to gain a lot of experience points and improve his level. If he wants to move from the Lord stage to the epic stage or the legendary stage, he needs to return to the world of the undead. Coincidentally, in the notebook obtained from Rogris, there is a clue to a dead world larger than the burial ground. The massacre of Giant Rock City is coming to an end. When this last experience value is obtained, it is time for him to leave the human world and go to find clues in the dead world.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.